and welcome you to our virtual auditorium for BAC's Conversations on Art series with our host, Meg Linton, and guest artist, Amir Zaki. I'm joining you today from BAC's new studio pop-up here in Santa Monica. We're located at 1025 Montana Avenue, where we're hosting in-person classes again for the first time in over 2 years. We're going to be at our pop-up through the end of August. So it has been a challenging time for the world and for the BAC as we transitioned our offerings to a virtual format, which has allowed the BAC to continue to fulfill its mission of providing high-quality arts educational opportunities to students of all ages. Our success is due to our incredible and generous board of directors, leadership council, donors, staff, faculty, and students who support the BAC through thick and thin. The pandemic has also allowed us to experiment with new technology and to create programs like Conversations on Art. And I need to thank our anonymous donor who has made this series possible for the next 12 months. We can only do all that we do because of our generous donors who believe everyone should have access to the arts and education. Our host, Meg Linton, and I met at Otis College of Art and Design while she was the director of the Ben Maltz Gallery and I was the dean of continuing education. We collaborated on many public programs, and I'm thrilled we are able to bring her love and respect for the artists to BAC. Meg has been visiting artist studios for over 20 years in her various roles as director and curator of contemporary art spaces in the Central and Southern California region. Currently, Meg is lead producer on a documentary film about performance art in Los Angeles in the 1970s and 1980s called Acting Like Women, directed by Sherry Galkey. She is also working on an exhibition about the life and work of artist Keith Julius Puccinelli, writing a novel, and of course, conversing today with Amir Zaki this afternoon. Welcome, Meg.
Hi, thank you, Amy. I'm so happy to be here. Welcome to our Conversations on Art and our virtual studio visit with Amir Zaki today. Happy belated Cinco de Mayo and happy early Mother's Day to all those hardworking moms out there. Before I introduce Amir, a big thank you to the Brentwood Art Center and our anonymous donor for hosting us today and our behind the scenes team with Kathleen, Jordan, and Edlin, who are making everything happen for us. We are recording today's presentation. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box and I will either work them into the conversation or ask them at the end when we will get a glimpse of Amir's studio and his new body of work. I'd also like to ask that if people can turn off mute their mics and turn off their video while we're talking today, that would be wonderful. Also in the chat box, you will also see that I've put some additional information and links about Amir and his upcoming shows and events, along with instructions on how you can download the chat notes for future reference. It's super easy. I met Amir when I visited his Huntington Beach studio last fall, so our conversation is a new one, and I look forward to developing it over the years. Amir came out of UCLA and studied photography at a bridge point between analog and digital. And because of that, he is a true hybrid of traditional processes and new technologies. While the tools of his trade are always of interest and evolving, it is his eye and way of capturing the world around us that is fascinating. Amir has said, and I quote, "Photography is so much about cultivating a skill of sustained observation. And today we will see evidence of his skill and the beauty of his aesthetic expression." Welcome, Amir, and thank you for being with us and inviting us into your studio.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for showing up, everybody, to this virtual studio visit. So yeah, I really appreciate the introduction. It's nice.
Yeah. I'm going to switch us over. I'm going to share screen and switch us over to our presentation. Just bear with me 1 second. Will I get it full screen? There we go. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. So we're just going to jump in because the work is fabulous. So Amir, do you want to tell us what we're looking at?
Yeah, sure. Let me just do a 1 minute kind of brief
Sure.
bio before I start talking about this work. It maybe will be helpful.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so I'm a Southern California native. I have one immigrant parent from Egypt and one from Minnesota. My father came here in the '60s to study at the university where he met my mom. They both moved out to Southern California in the early '70s when I was born, 1974, and so I grew up in Beaumont, which some of you may know is about in between here or basically LA and Palm Springs, more or less, closer to Palm Springs. Pretty small town, very suburban, very open landscape, and not a lot of people at the time. 10,000 people or something during the time I grew up. So just say all that to kind of paint a little bit of a picture about maybe my relationship to landscape and my approach to what I'm interested in. I think has a great deal to do with like everybody's, with their upbringing and their surroundings. My family was a fairly unique cosmopolitan family in that part of Southern California at the time. Um, Having a parent from the Middle East, and so that just paints that little picture. Oh, I have a here. That's my folks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Um, so, like Meg said, I went to UCLA. I went to UC Riverside as an undergraduate, which where I teach. Now I've been teaching there for 20 years.
Mhm.
And this body of work is called Empty Vessel. We're starting in around 2019 with my work. We're just going to look at work from a few years ago and then what I'm working on now. So there's about 20 years of work that precedes this. I did grow up skateboarding in that
sorry.
kind of area that I was talking about. I I have an interest in the landscape. I have an interest in architecture. So there was a kind of like perfect storm, I would say, when this body of work came to be, because uh, I love the way concrete looks. I was very interested in these um, these empty skate parks from a kind of architectural point of view, but also thinking about them as contemporary landscape. They are growing. They're showing up all over the world. When I was growing up, there were very few of these. They were kind of few and far between, and I didn't really have that much of a relationship with them. But in my early 30s, I kind of had a little bit of a short renaissance where I started skating again as an adult with a midlife crisis and a young child, and then I quit because I don't want to break any bones. But
Really good idea.
yeah, but I will say I have a fairly intimate relationship with these kinds of structures, and I think that that's part of why I was able to do this in such a sustained way. Is that, those of you who are less familiar with these skate parks, is oftentimes they're invisible from the street or barely visible from the street because in fact they're excavations, right? So you've got a landscape. If you think about a flat landscape with buildings, which are easy to notice, skate parks are essentially holes dug into the ground with some variation. So noticing them from the outside or being a kind of outsider perspective is very, very different than kind of climbing inside. And so that's was the main starting point was finding a way to access these where I could climb inside. I could be in there for an amount of time that you need to be in to actually really study and observe a place and kind of understand how it might translate photographically. And so I would show up at dawn all the time, maybe when it's still dark. Uh, I photographed 12 skate parks, all in California, ranging from San Diego to San Jose. And um, yeah, I gained access in mostly in legitimate ways. A few times I had to get creative about how I would get into these, but I did have the ability to be into these places without anybody around, with very few exceptions, and that was super important.
But it's not about documenting like all of the skate parks. This isn't about, is it
No,
about,
no,
no.
there's thousands
Yeah.
and thousands and thousands.
Thousands of them.
Yeah.
So it's about finding the right ones that speak to you.
Yes.
And then you know, I know this will come up in later bodies of work too, but this idea of pilgrimage, of like going and seeking these places out, especially at dawn. You like the early morning twilight
Yeah.
light.
Yeah, I like the solitude. I do really feel like I'm getting away with something. There's a kind of excitement in that process for me, to be alone in places where the light is just breaking, is because I really feel like, I'm experiencing something that very few people are experiencing, literally, because I'm alone most of the time. Um, yeah, and so I kind of sought these out. I would scout them online and look at Google Maps and get aerial views and just kind of try to understand which ones I could have access to. But you're absolutely right. It's a project that could go on forever. But I usually kind of find a point of exhaustion with the body of work when I feel like I've
Mhm.
kind of explored the visual possibilities. There's hills and valleys and interesting light and different weather, and I feel like I have quite a bit of variation. There's actually, it's the biggest body of work I've ever made. It's 72 pictures. There is a book that goes along with it called California Concrete, which I'll talk about in a moment. Um, so the book is only photographs of the skate park, but I haven't at all talked about the sort of the counter, or the counterpart to this body of work, which are these photographs of broken vessels, and that sort of taps into an interest I've had for many years now with my photographs, where I do work in series, in a serial fashion, but I also work in these kind of related sub-series. I'm really interested in the way that photographs communicate with one another on the wall, when you experience them next to one another, when you get up close to a small picture or back up to it from a big picture. And so I often think about ways to have a relationship between two kinds of photographs that may on the surface seem really disparate and odd together. So in the middle of this process, which I was doing for months and months, I was in the studio looking at test prints on the wall, and I didn't say this, but I have a background as my undergraduate as also a philosophy minor. I was a philosophy major and then a minor, so I'm deeply interested in basically anything philosophical,
Mhm.
and so I ask myself questions. I ask other people questions. Asking myself something as fundamental as, what are these things? What are these places? Because I struggle even with the language. They're not particularly architecture in a traditional sense. They're, like I said, they're excavations, but then there's form, right? The form is poured concrete, and as I was thinking about them, I thought, well, they're basically empty vessels. They're basically just very elaborately designed bowls in some way. So then that got me.
Amir, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit because we've got I think, some individual photos of these.
Yeah.
We can come back to the book.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. So, I started thinking about how I might incorporate this idea of a vessel, and I'll make that story very, very short. But I started by actually working really elaborately in digital software because I have a background in doing that as well with other bodies of work. And through a process of just experimenting, at one point I wanted to see how something broke. I'm very interested in this moment that something functional becomes dysfunctional. So even in the skate parks, you see that a lot of times there's leaves or odd weather, or the fact that they're just simply empty kind of speaks to them seeming like almost dysfunctional. And so I like this idea of a broken thing. Anyway, I started photographing these things, videotaping them, me breaking things, and that led to eventually photographs of broken ceramics. I can't remember. Did I put those in the
You
slide?
did. I'm just trying to.
Okay,
There's
sorry.
so many good images. It's like I don't want to move too fast,
No,
but
no, we can go.
we can totally jump around.
Yeah, we might need to jump around. So what I had done is I tried gluing them back together. It is important to kind of go over the process because I feel like so much art is, it's like the way you arrive at something is always so much more interesting in a way. It's like I came to this through a process of wanting to do something completely different. And eventually I was in my studio photographing all this stuff I glued together and blah, blah, blah. And finally I saw one shard, one broken piece. And I thought, well, I'm just going to photograph it while I'm here. I'm in the process. And I photographed it, and it was kind of immediate. I really did feel at the moment that like everything I wanted to express about these things was captured in just a piece. And so then I went on the process of basically buying ceramics from Goodwill and thrift stores and things like that, in order simply to break them and photograph them. And so there's all sorts of kind of relationships between the images of concrete skate parks and the broken vessels that are poetic and formal. The kind of fragility of the ceramics and the solidity or sort of seemingly solid quality of the concrete, the way the light reflects off these things. I photograph. Yeah.
I have a question. So because of this light, are you photographing in natural light when you're inside in the studio?
So the first one I made was in my studio, and it's a really important question because I've noticed in the last 10 years or something that part of my motivation and interest of these ceramics was actually a kind of dialogue with what I've seen as a proliferation of ceramics in the art world.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I almost always notice is when a ceramics piece, which can be incredibly beautiful, is photographed and displayed, it's as if it exists in a void, like it's not even in this world. It's just like this sort of floating, perfectly lit thing. I definitely didn't want to do that, and so immediately I developed a way of photographing these that could deal with some elements that I didn't have control over. So I'm really interested in the fact that I don't have control over the way something looks when it breaks. It's a matter of choosing. And then I would set these up in my backyard. It's always natural light. The light is always in the afternoon coming through palm fronds, and it always has to be windy. So the camera is on a 3-second timer, so I don't know what the light's going to be like in any picture because the palm fronds are moving. And so all that element of chance is super important to me in the way that these work. I'm interested in these kind of still lives that I set up, but I also like that there's things that I can't foresee, which I guess is kind of just a photographer's interest. We like to come across things that we couldn't predict. It's I guess part of the appeal.
Well, and also it's nice in juxtaposition with the skate parks because those are at morning and dawn.
Yeah.
Different type of twilight. So you have the beginning of the day and the end of the day.
Right.
But they have a similar quality about them. Like the light is different, but it's similar.
Mm-hmm.
That same
long shadows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the way I play with scale is also really important because some of the images are very small, medium, or very large, and in installation, as you saw in the first few slides, there's a kind of a rhythm that's created when you see something like this that may be printed really large and a skate park that's small, or vice versa. There's this dialogue that's created when you kind of experience these in person.
Yeah, there was one image in the gallery where you had
Yeah,
like with the two little ones
yeah,
next to the big one.
yeah. There's a lot of that. This is one of my favorite things about making a show is making a show that I feel like has some kind of rhythm to it.
Mhm.
And I've been playing with that sort of thing, I would say, since the very beginning of my career. Is just is really not, almost never having a kind of uniformity in the way the show looks.
Yeah. Also, what's interesting with this, a lot of the images in the show, there's always this juxtaposition with nature. So you have this concrete, and then you have some element, whether it's a bird or a tree, or just even the sky and the light being so prominent. So there's always that juxtaposition, which is interesting. And I was also gonna ask you, because I know we'll talk about it with the series with the peers. Are you photographing this in the same way where it's over a period of time when you're doing the skate parks?
And the ceramics, or
Yeah,
yeah,
so
so they're different.
okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. So it's real important to talk about process here. So
Mhm.
skate parks, if we, yeah, you can just kind of park on one of these. So I'm using a process. Essentially they're composites. So I'm a gesture person, so you can see me. So basically, in a scene like this, the camera I'm using is essentially a telephoto lens that's zoomed in on a small portion. Let's say 1/30th of this picture of the sky, and you basically register that, and you register the top right and bottom left or whatever. The camera then makes a series of overlapping images over time. So it makes a click, takes some time, moves over. So it's basically a robotic tripod head. Now, that process may take 10 minutes. I pause in between, I refocus, I wait for things to come in and out of frames. So, what you're seeing is essentially, and this comes into play in the new work as well, you're seeing a, a kind of odd representation that looks like one moment of time, but in fact is probably 10 minutes or so on average. So the light changes, birds come in and out, um, you know, all sorts of kind of subtle things happen during that period. The reason I do it, not only it creates a kind of interesting look that doesn't really look like a traditional camera lens, but it allows me to make very, very large photographs. Some of the pictures are 5 by 6 feet, so you get an incredible amount of detail in a particular image. But it's more than that for me at this point. I really enjoy what it means conceptually, which is that it does cause me to make certain kinds of pictures that I wouldn't make maybe with a single lens. Um,
Mhm.
and it also, I just love the idea of so much time passing while an image is being captured. There's just interesting things that happen in that process that I'm into. The
Well, because
ceramics are one image. Yeah.
yeah, but taking, I just the passage of time is what fascinates me, whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, because I think that what it does to the light
Yeah.
is it kind of, it doesn't capture those subtle differences, but it does make motion or something happen within it. So it creates this very kind of ethereal quiet or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
really interesting texture and technique.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that. Yeah, I think that there is a quality that's hard to exactly pinpoint. I'm also, I've been working with digital technology since basically I was taught traditional photography. I'm very interested in it. I'm teaching a black and white darkroom class this quarter, but I'm also an early adopter of digital technology. So I'm very um, open to it. I'm pretty I don't hesitate to change things in an image. I'm very interested in kind of making images that look like they're up kind of about my desire in the landscape.
Yeah.
So if there's something that happens by accident that I love, I leave it. If there's something in the image that I don't think is very interesting, I'll erase it. I really don't. I'm fairly promiscuous about all that.
Yeah, because there's different ways of getting to the truth, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes watching like, a very stylized type of theater like Kabuki actually gets to the emotion and the truth of an emotion or experience more so than someone doing something literal.
right, right. This image is, I hope people can see it, but if you can see sort of, there's the drain in this image, but above it about, partially, there's a little thing that looks like a white speck. Well, this picture is 5 by 6 feet. And in reality, when you see it, you can kind of go into that very easily and see that little white speck. And it's something I could have easily deleted, but it's a little folded note. And I just love stuff like that. Like those things in photographs I would never get rid of, but like it might be something with text. I almost always get rid of any text. I don't really like the idea of the distraction of reading something in a photograph. It seems to take up too much weight.
Yeah, because you want to assign some kind of meaning to it, why that word is there, or
right.
I just love this one with the trees peeking through.
Yeah.
So then the vessels are shot just with a single moment.
Mm-hmm. It's the first work I've shot with a single frame image since 2012, and so it was a little different for me. But I did want to have that. I guess I really had that desire to have an element of chance, and I think that's why I put it on a timer and made sure there was some variation going on. But it was interesting when I made these because I was sort of posting process images and videos, slow motion videos of me breaking things on Instagram. And it brought up a really kind of poignant, ethical kind of conversation that people were having. People were disturbed by it a little bit. It seemed violent and it seemed destructive. And for me, that was very helpful because I didn't view it that way at all. I view that the artwork I'm making is this. It's a photograph. So something was destroyed for something else to be created. So the destruction is just part of the process. And I think that happens all the time in art. But it is interesting because the idea of taking something that's functional and breaking it taps into some kind of taboo in a weird way. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it would also be a different piece if this was like a very specific, if you knew the artist, the ceramicist, and it was about breaking that person's work or erasing that drawing or those kinds of things.
Right. Yeah, I only had one piece that I bought that I couldn't break. I still
really?
have. Yeah.
It's funny how we become attached.
It is. It's kind of ugly, and I just couldn't break it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So,
baby. So tell me about so you put these out in the landscape.
Yeah, so I had this incredible opportunity to install some of the skate park photographs in Bali on this road that's a shortcut road between two kind of surfing cities. And it's famous. It's kind of treacherous. It's really skinny, and people know cars routinely will kind of fall off the edge of it into the marsh or whatever. So they have these billboards that go. It's like a half-mile road, and they have. I did 20-something billboards, so 10 or 11 on each side, and the images got cropped and all sorts of weird things happened. But it was a pretty great opportunity for me. I didn't get to go. It was during the pandemic, but I just loved the juxtaposition between the way these things looked scaled up, and there was no text. People would go on these and just kind of wonder what they were. I think there might have been some information at the start or the end, but yeah, this was a unique opportunity, something I never imagined doing, but I was very happy about it.
Well, and to have them placed in such a lush landscape too.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have that short like video they made of this.
Oh, is there?
That might be coming. Yeah, does that play? I
Right.
think it's 1 minute.
There we go.
So the people who put this on made this really kind of nice trailer for it, uh, and you get a better sense of the area that it was in.
How long was it up for?
I think it was intended to be shorter, like a month, and I think it ended up being more like 3 months, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
I titled the work "Flow Through Space," and yeah, here's the kind of drone shot. You can get a sense.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't get to see it in person.
I know they said I'm supposed to have an exhibition there at some point, but this just keeps getting pushed. I love that with the architecture. So the work is kind of, I think that part of wanting to put that in there was, just to think about the way that the work has, um, it has these different lives. The book in itself is its own thing. The exhibition combining the ceramics is its own thing. The billboard project, so it had this potential to kind of uh, morph into these different kind of manifestations. So that was unique for me. That hasn't happened in other work so much.
So we had a question come in. So
Yeah.
what is your criteria for selecting which ceramics to use other than getting them used? Are they all vessels or are they plates or random pieces?
Oh, so my criteria is not very rigorous. It's a matter of selection. So I think of it very much like parallel to making a photograph. So if I go into a scene and I frame the image in a certain way based on a kind of like intuition and style and history, that's very similar to when I break a ceramic. It's like I've got four shards, I pick them up and I study them, and I think, well, that one will photograph in an interesting way, or look at that shape that I couldn't have possibly imagined it making. There's one of them that has just like an incredible kind of way it broke.
Mhm.
That's how I choose. I basically choose on what I think is going to make an interesting photograph, and of course I edit. I don't. There's a bunch that didn't make the cut, but
But you are selecting more functional wear than you are like,
oh yeah,
a character or,
yeah,
Royal Dalton figurine or something
yeah.
like
No,
that.
they were all bowls or cups. I don't think there are any plates in the selection, unless I'm
Mhm.
forgetting. I think they were all things that mimicked this idea of something that had the function of carrying liquid, or something like that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and yeah,
that's great.
good question. I mean, and this is kind of the third. This is the synthesis. There's the skate parks and the ceramics, and then I had this opportunity to make a limited edition thing, which is what this box is. I'm very interested in puzzles and in yeah. This is good. This is just a documentation of how it functions. I have one in person. We can look at the end. Basically, it's a photograph of 49. I mean, it's a project with 49 individual bowls, concrete bowls that I made by taking a piece of concrete and just taking a clump, sorry for the siren, and putting it over a rock. So every one was made from the exact same mold, which was this kind of rock that's about the size of my head. So everyone is different, and everyone is essentially made in the same way. So I love this idea of that variation, and it's a pretty elaborate thing. So then I photographed all 49 of them. So you saw the poster. The poster is all 49 of them shot from the front and from the bottom, and it basically exists as a piece. It has a poem at the bottom. It has a uh, the bowl. It has the poster, and it has a print. And the print is on this Japanese paper, and it's a photograph of one of the vessels in one of the skate parks, composited or sandwiched together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I felt like it was a way to kind of synthesize a lot of the project, but also this idea of the empty vessel, has a history as a kind of Eastern uh, philosophical and contemplative tradition in Buddhism, especially. And so, this poem that's at the very bottom. So once you empty out everything, the whole thing is about an emptying process. You take this out, you take this out, you take this out. At the very bottom is this poem, which is by the as far as I understand, the first female Zen uh, like master in the 1223 is when she was born.
Yeah. Do you want to read that?
Sure. So it says, this way and that way, I tried to keep the pail together, hoping the weak bamboo would never break. Suddenly, the bottom fell out. No more water, no more moon in the water, emptiness in my hand. So this was her enlightenment poem. Um, I have an interest in all of this stuff. It was kind of in the background when I was making all of it. The empty skate parks are, emptiness is an interesting idea because it doesn't mean nothing. It means that there's potential. And so part of what I find so interesting about the skate parks is that when you look at them, they're all about potential energy, potential movement, being used by people to do, acrobatic things or whatever.
I see a lot of your work is like it's that moment of quiet just before sunrise, or that moment of quiet just before sunset. It's all full of this strange energy and potential. So that leads us to the newest body of work.
Yeah. So this body of work is called On Being Here. It's an exhibition I'm going to have in a month or less, right around a month, I guess, at Diane Rosenstein in Hollywood. So, this work was made throughout the pandemic, and I was, how to get to these. The process is pretty complicated, I would say. It involves photographing again at dawn, also using that same process as before. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm walking to the very end of a pier I've done 25 of these, so piers along the coast of California. Arrive at dawn or dark, walk all the way to the end, and whatever is there I photograph. It doesn't matter if there's architecture or not architecture. It's a matter of the kind of system that I've set up. And that process takes about 45 minutes or an hour because I'm taking several and I'm watching the light change. And then when that process is done, I pack up all my gear and I walk all the way to the end of the pier, and I walk down and I walk underneath through the center, looking through the columns, and I make another bunch of photographs using the same process. And the third step is compositing those two very sort of different perspectives together to create a coherent image. And I've done that for, like I said, 25 piers. So there's a kind of consistency in the way that they look that's very typological. But there's also an incredible amount of variation. Every single pier has been constructed in completely different ways. It's actually kind of remarkable. I grew up, in California, and I've seen a lot of these, but in this process of studying them, it was just incredible. There's literally not one pier that was, designed by the same architect and constructed in the same way. They're just all completely different. Concrete, wood, some they've been destroyed bunches of times. I'm really interested in this impermanence with them. They're kind of symbols to me of something that's enduring erosion, but constantly sort of, I don't want to say fighting with nature, but there's some kind of,
they're subject to it.
Yeah, they're just relentlessly being beat up by the ocean, so this thing that's very serene, the ocean and calm, it's also just beating these things. And I really,
You can't have, in some ways, you can't have just one template for a pier because the consistency of what the foundation would be, the
right,
foundation's constantly moving. If it's sand, you know,
yeah,
the tides are constantly shifting,
yeah,
whether there's jetties or not, or if it's public use or for industrial use.
right, right, for sure. Yeah, they're all different lengths. Some of them have been completely destroyed and moved, and the titles of the works are actually not by location. They're a long string of when they were built, how many times they were destroyed, all the years that they were built, destroyed, and renovated or restored. So some of the titles are, really long. Some of them
Mhm.
are not so long. I also am very, during this pandemic, there was this feeling that a lot of people had about kind of wanting to escape. There's an idea of wanting to. That's why the title is really about a kind of being present. But there was everybody wanted to escape, but there was nowhere to go and nobody to see. So there was a therapeutic quality to this work for me, where I feel like there's a kind of existential drive we have to get like as far away as we can. And I see these piers that jut out into the ocean as a symbol of like the farthest we can go by foot, or the edge of the continent. There's this kind of
Mhm.
idea, and that's how I think about them.
Well, and also I mean, I told you this before, I love the kind of upstairs, downstairs effect, especially some more so than others have kind of this portal below when you can see all the way through, like a
Yes,
doorway into another world, like you're gonna, step off and be in Atlantis or something.
right. It's interesting to me to think about these as some of the most extreme kind of compressions of time and space. Before I worked with kind of a compression of time when the skate parks, but these are also just two. It has a relationship to cubism in a funny way, where
Mhm.
I'm presenting a kind of multiple fragments of perspectives that we experience visually in one coherent thing. And but it reads immediately as cohesive. Like, most people who come in and just sort of see them, they're perplexed, but they don't know why they're perplexed. That they feel like they're looking at something that is fairly, realistic. And that's important for me. I'm not really interested in fantasy.
I mean, that's how I felt when I first got to your studio, was I was like, oh, I recognize these places. And the more we talked and the more I kept looking, it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right.
Right.
They feel good, but they don't, it's like something's off visually. But you can't really pinpoint it. You can't say like, oh, this is out of focus or this.
Right.
It's very subtle, and it just makes you feel, um, it brings you into the present.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think we're going to shift here to look at your studio. So I'm
Sure.
going to stop sharing, and it's going to all be you.
Okay.
Okay.
So forgive me for just a little bit it's going to be a little jumpy until I get the camera kind of set up. So it's going to be kind of clunky, but I will just kind of do a little.
And I want to make sure that we talk about your book too.
Yes. How much time? Oh yeah. Okay. We'll talk. So this is just my studio. I will say I'm a big fan of making models. So my show coming up at Diane Rosenstein, I don't want to spoil it too much because I want people to actually go. But I did make this massive model of the space. It's funny. I'm so used to digital ways of doing things, and I did do a SketchUp model, but I'm actually, it was way easier to envision the show by making a physical model. So um,
Slow
okay.
down just a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
There we go. There's a nice pan up shot
Okay,
of
I'm
the
gonna
studio.
set this on something and hang on for a second.
Yep. Because I want to, the books you've done, and even that Empty Vessel project, is very much about you're very considerate of how someone will move through the experience of these objects.
Yeah, I guess that, yes, I think those are things I'm pretty interested in. How's that? Can you see the book?
Yeah.
Okay, so I made, besides that California Concrete book, I have a new book that just came out this year that I will talk about in a second. Um, but I just want to talk about this, like, kind of historically, that I made this book in 2010, which is called 11 minus 1. It's a long story. It's a kind of homage piece to the artist Fishley and Weiss. But I'll just show you a couple pages of it, because essentially it's it it opens up each page. There's 10 pages, plates, which are reproductions of Fishley and Weiss photographs. But each one opens up and into a cube. Will fold into a perfect cube, and making this was all experimentation. I kind of did it over a long period of time. But if you look at the back, see if you can see that. That diagram shows all the ways that a cube can be unfolded. And so that's a kind of legend of what's in the book. So it's quite elaborate. It opens up and folds, and you can open up each page and leave it open or close them separately. It's hand stitched. It was a very crazy, crazy making project. I'm very happy.
What was the edition on that?
500.
Oh, okay.
I've got the only remaining ones. It was a show that it was LAX art when they were in Culver City, and it was this book on display and 10 video animations of kind of, I animated digitally these things I made,
Nice.
these Fishley and Weiss things. So that's just a little background, because I'm very interested in making books, but I'm also interested in thinking about the relationship between, photography, sculpture, you know, how to make a book, how to make the person looking at a book feel aware that they're looking at a book, that it's not just a transparent, piece of information, that they're handling something with their body. I'm really interested in mind body practices, Tai Chi and yoga, and so I'm very interested in, like, how one interacts with a physical object. So the book is called Building and Becoming. It's co-published by X Artist Books and Doppelhaus, and it's basically a 23-year survey of my work, but it's not organized chronologically. It's organized on a left and right side. It's double gatefold. And so the left side is all the, quote, built environment. It's the building side. And the right side, yeah, left, right, is becoming. And that's the side that is all the, quote, natural landscape. And of course, those categories of my work are a little bit messy, but basically the book can be handled either one side at a time or simultaneously. It's about this kind of symmetry and asymmetry, and at the back there's there interview.
And I'm going to interrupt you too, because you had told me you're cross dominant with your hands.
Yeah, I am.
So that kind of comes out of that as well. And then also you had connected it back to your parents and their background and kind of being from these dual cultures.
Yes, for sure. There's a bit of an autobiographical quality where the left side opens up the way books written in English do, and the other side would open up the way that books written in Arabic do, or in other languages where they read from the other way. So that is a kind of a nod in a way. And I think about, my hybrid, this idea of hybridity, is really fascinating for me in terms of just kind of my identity, but also the way I work, the kind of hybrid between digital and analog, the hybrid of the natural and the built. So it's a kind of a through line for the work, and I think my own background. So the way I structured the interview and the essay is that it actually reads completely across all four parts of the book. So the way you would read the interview would be page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. which is probably going to drive some people insane. But I really like that part of the difficulty of. Part of it was a kind of inside joke because I feel like nobody reads these things. So I thought, well,
Well, I read it all the way through and it was a challenge, but I found you actually have to have it on a table.
okay, yeah,
And then I was on a roller chair, so I'd kind of roll across,
yeah, oh, that's good.
read it, and it worked really well.
Great. Well, we tried to make the font kind of big. So
Yeah, the font size is appreciated.
this is an essay by Walter Ben Michaels and Jennifer Ashton, and it's a really complicated and great essay where they try to relate the work to poetry and this idea of flatness, and they do reference the. Let's see, you can see that they do reference the older
Mhm.
book that I made. So, so
And
that's
the interview in there too. Who was the
Karina
woman who
Pipen.
interviewed you? She
Karina
had,
Pipen.
yeah, she was fantastic. It's a great interview.
Yeah, I thought so too. We're friends. And she's actually going to be doing the gallery walkthrough with me and a book launch at the gallery. So yeah, that's
And
just
and the show opens on June 4th, correct?
Saturday, June 4th. The show opens, and I will be doing a book launch before that on the 20th at the Brand Library. There's a group show I'm in there. Uh, and yeah, this is a long time coming. I kind of micromanaged the design of this book, but I ended up making something I was really happy with in the
And
end.
who was the designer?
Chris Svensson,
Mm-hmm.
great. Basically, he's the most patient person you can imagine if he had to deal with me making all these weird changes.
Yeah.
So I can try to make that.
Well, this is
Yeah.
really wonderful. And does anybody have any questions before we kind of wrap up?
We have two in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing them. Let me see. Make the chat bigger. Okay, so oh, someone wants to know, can you talk about what you remove in the images?
Yeah,
Again.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. It varies quite dramatically, but like I said, signage. Um, what I'll do if there's language is I'll usually try to turn it into like a monochrome painting. I don't know if there's any here, but if there's text, I don't remove the whole sign. I just try to remove the text, so there's this like blankness. Graffiti, things that have to do with language. It really does vary. The other thing I'm doing is I'm adding too. I'm I've I do things to entertain myself while I'm making work, and part of that is like becoming much more playful as I'm getting a little older. And so the idea of birds has become a little bit taken on a life of its own. With the skate park images, I would notice that basically crows and seagulls, the kind of lowly birds, would always sort of end up being there, probably because there's trash cans around. And so I would collect pictures of birds, and even if they weren't naturally in the picture, I started putting them in pictures. So every photograph with a sky with the skate parks has some birds in it, either one or more, either
Mhm.
naturally or by my design. The piers, it's become almost ridiculous because there's lots of birds around, and I will, massage them in and out of the photographs. Like I said, I'm pretty promiscuous about how I deal with those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone else has asked, let's see. Okay, here it is. I love these peers. I wonder if you think your method, a kind of exaggeration of the real, changes your own understanding of the place. For me, it's often about the social.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, so I think the question is, if you think your method is a kind of exaggeration of the real, does it change your own understanding of the place as you spend more time looking at it?
Yeah.
Because you're looking at it without people. I mean, because I look at these spaces and I feel the absence of all the activity.
Yeah.
We normally associate with it.
Yeah, with the piers, there might be fishermen, fisher women around. I will remove them. I really like to leave their gear when I can. I don't know what's meant by the social, to be perfectly honest. Maybe that person can clarify.
I think it's that it's a social space. I think it's what we're talking about, that there's
Yeah.
people there. But I like the fact that you leave the evidence of people.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like photographs are always about human vision in a way and human presence and experience. So oftentimes my work, the point of view of the photograph is somewhere that, again, like the book, like calls attention to itself. My pictures are often from points of view from severely looking under or looking down, or hardly ever from a kind of perspective of just a person standing, because in
Mhm.
in those images we almost just ignore that perspective. But if it's something extreme, or in these with the peers, it's like, I don't know where you would be standing to make this picture. You just, it would be some strange space that's like in a twilight zone. So I'm interested in human presence in how it's implied in a photograph.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, just the fact you're photographing it, it's always in relationship to human experience, whatever photograph
Yeah.
is being made. And then another question came in. It said, I missed how the outdoor images in Bali came about. Was that a museum show or a kind of public art project?
No, it was a public art project. It was just kind of came about. Someone who has a hotel there and art gallery knew about my work and wanted to do something in the city, because the billboards were being, during the pandemic, they were kind of abandoned. Like nobody wanted to advertise on them. It was kind of a weird time. So they arranged to sort of take them over for an art project. And as far as I know, it's the only one that they've done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's see. I think that's it. We reposted all of Amir's contacts and links to the exhibitions and the publications. And I believe your current publication is now available online. So you can
Yeah.
purchase it online, or you can actually go to the gallery or go to the book launch at the Brand Library, correct?
Yeah, I'm doing a
Yeah.
couple signings. You can get the book directly through the publisher. You can get it directly through me. The ones that come through me are signed, so you can go through my website and do it that way. Anyway, if you
Yeah.
like, but
This has been really wonderful. And thank you for giving us so much time and insight into your work. And I can't wait to see the show. It's going to be wonderful.
yeah, please come to the show and see the work in person. I didn't get to talk about the one thing about the work in person is I don't use any kind of glazing or surface, anything that covers the surface. So the images are quite unique to look at in person. They're just the surface of the photograph is right there. And this work is going to be two sizes. So there's some large ones and some kind of medium. But yeah, I hope people see it in person.
Great. Thank you so much, Amir. Everybody,
Thanks,
have a
everybody.
great day and have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.